I'm Jonathan Sparks. Thank you for coming to ServiceNow. So just a little bit about me and who I am, and then sort of what the session is going to be here. So I run product for our platform. That's kind of my responsibility. So, what do we build? Why do we build it? How do we sell it? Those types of things. I've been here now for almost 8 years. So when I joined, this was a startup. There was something like 30 people in the building. I think as of our recent earnings call, there's now 5,400 employees. So it's a little bit different now than then. I wish I could say that when I joined, I sort of realized exactly what ServiceNow was. I sort of got a call from a recruiter. My interview was in a conference room that had a view of the beach. And I sort of just thought, well, this is kind of cool. Maybe I'll just hang out here for a little while. I had previously been working at a company called Intuit as a software engineer. And I, like I said, I didn't really understand what necessarily ServiceNow was or did or anything like that. Coming into ServiceNow, I quickly realized, man, this is a company that has a platform for building applications within businesses that sort of is awesome. It gets rid of a ton of stuff that annoys me as a software engineer and things that I've done in the past. And this is pretty cool. Maybe I should stick around. So that's who I am. What are we going to talk about today? So we're going to go through a little bit of what is the platform? What is our strategy around this? Where do we see the market going? Where is our vision and what we think, what we want to do? And that's going to be something I'll talk about. And then we really want to get into the product itself and show you exactly what it looks like when you're working in ServiceNow, so that you can get up close and personal, which is another reason why we want to get you into these different demo pods, so that you can see sort of some of the cool things that you can do with ServiceNow. With that being said, I'll introduce Dominic. So Dominic runs corporate development, and he's going to come and kind of give you a company overview to start. So
thanks. So hey, my name is Dominic Phillips. Thanks a lot for being with us today. As Jonathan said, I run corporate development and investor relations. I've been at ServiceNow for a little over 3 years now. So I'm going to spend 5 minutes with you up front, giving you a quick overview of the company and talking to you a little bit about our strategy. And so for those of you that aren't as familiar with ServiceNow, it's a cloud-based solution, and we offer structured workflow and automation between requesters of service and fulfillers of service throughout the enterprise. We license our products primarily as a subscription, and we're really selling to the largest companies in the world, primarily the Global 2000, of which we have 40% of those as customers today. We have employees around the world. As Jonathan said, we now have 5,600 employees, and all over the world, San Diego, Santa Clara, Seattle, Europe, Israel, India, Australia. From a financial perspective, we just had our Q2 earnings yesterday, and we increased our 2017 revenue guidance to just over $1.9 billion, which represents 37% year-over-year growth, making ServiceNow the fastest growing enterprise software company with more than $1 billion in revenue. As I said, we focus on the largest enterprises in the world. Here's a snapshot of some of the logos that we count as customers. What I'd like to call out is that we have a very diverse customer base. We're not focused on one specific industry vertical. I wouldn't say one industry vertical represents a significant portion of our revenue. And so a lot of large logos, a lot of Global 2000s that we count as customers today. I'm going to transition briefly into the problem that we're solving for customers. And so what we've seen in the consumer space is that there's a number of these new next-gen companies that are coming in and disrupting a lot of the legacy vendors in the consumer space. And they're doing it by getting to market faster, by providing more transparency, and ultimately by providing just a better user experience. And so we've seen a lot of disruption, and expectations in the consumer world have changed significantly over the last several years. But when we look within the enterprise, it doesn't match what we're experiencing in the consumer world. You've got a number of employees throughout the enterprise that are trying to get work done and working with various departments like IT, HR, legal, et cetera. And the way that work is getting done is in a very unstructured way, through emails, through phone calls, through Excel spreadsheets. and there's not a lot of transparency in the way that work is getting done, and ultimately leads to lower productivity. So this is the problem that ServiceNow is ultimately trying to solve for customers. This is a snapshot of our product overview, and it really starts at the infrastructure layer. We have, as I said, it's a cloud-based solution, so we host the data for our customers in our data centers. It's a multi-instance architecture, it's highly scalable, and it's very secure. On top of that infrastructure is our platform layer that Jonathan spoke a bit about earlier. The platform consists of a number of reusable components, things that we've built into the platform, such as orchestration, workflow, service catalog, service portal, and our recently announced intelligent automation engine, which includes things like virtual agent technology and machine learning. On top of that platform, we've built a number of very horizontally focused applications for our customers in departments like IT, security, HR, and customer service. So we've taken a lot of those platform components and we've modified them for various departments, but we're effectively trying to solve the same problem, add more structured workflow and automation to work getting done in these various departments. What we're also seeing in these large customers is they have a lot of use cases or workflow needs where ServiceNow hasn't built an application. So we allow them to access those same reusable components in the platform and build their own custom applications that meet their specific business needs. And then on top of that, we also allow independent software vendors to access the platform and those components and build their own applications and sell them to our customers through our ServiceNow Store marketplace. So this is a snapshot of kind of how we're going to market. What I'd really call out is that the secret sauce of ServiceNow is really the platform. It's the same code base, it's the same data set, it's the same set of user profiles across all of the applications that we've built and that customers and ISVs are building on the platform. So again, quick overview. Hopefully that was helpful in terms of giving you a better perspective on the company, where we are from a financial perspective, customers that we're focused on, and how we're going to market.
Started, it's fair to say, as an IT workflow engine focused on ITSM. It sounds as though you're moving into a lot of other sides of the business. How would you compare yourselves against other kind of companies that do similar things? What is your niche? A company I'm thinking of is Salesforce, for example. I know that's focused on the sales side, but how would you then differentiate yourself as you move out of IT into the rest of the business?
Well, I think the interesting thing, and maybe not as known about ServiceNow, is that it really started as a platform company. When Fred Luddy, our founder, started ServiceNow, it was really to allow people with very little development experience to automate structured workflow. Found it very difficult to go out into the market and sell a platform as a product, and so he had to build applications on top of it, and built IT applications because that was his background, and that was an area ripe for disruption. But what I'd say is that we don't, as we're selling across these various departments, we don't consistently run into the same competitor over and over. I'd say our key competitor is really unstructured workflow, replacing stuff that's done in email and in spreadsheets, and again in phone calls. And we are running into competitors that are offering a structured workflow and automation across the entire enterprise. It's arguably a greenfield opportunity for the most part.
Let me ask a little bit about that. That's been a challenge for ServiceNow for a number of years now. Is that ServiceNow is perceived as the service desk solution, right? It's the service desk solution that's available in the cloud, and that's predominantly how people were using it, not just for IT, but then in other parts of service enablement. But yet, and I'm real interested to hear what you have to say about the platform. For a number of years, even when I was working to be a customer of ServiceNow, I saw the value in the platform, but it seemed like I was one of the few that saw that. And that seemed to be a continual challenge for folks within ServiceNow, is to actually get that engagement and get that enablement message across. How has that changed of late, and where are you getting the traction from a platform perspective?
Yeah. So I mean, I'd say that
because I agree with you. I agree with you that the platform is the value for ServiceNow, but it seemed like when I talk to customers, they don't get it. they're challenged with that.
I think we've done a very good job over the last several years of really evolving into more than just what customers maybe originally looked at us as an IT help desk solution. For the first time, we just announced our earnings yesterday. More than 50% of our new business is coming outside of ITSM. So we're really seeing a lot of traction in areas like we had a very strong quarter in HR, as I said, security operations, customer service. So we've done a very good job of taking this platform and moving it into new use cases for customers and really starting to get some traction in these new areas.
But are they using? But I'm going to test you on that because I see that, but they're still using So, for example, HR, they're still using it as essentially a support desk solution, but specifically around HR versus building in business automation routines and leveraging the platform for that purpose.
Yeah.
There's a big difference between using ServiceNow as a support desk solution for different departments versus using it as a more holistic automation routine and automation platform for business, right?
Yeah, so I think that, again, primarily that was the initial use case, but I think, if, for example, you brought up HR, that's an area where we now offer an entire employee portal. We offer an onboarding solution. So there's a lot of obviously automation and work that goes into when a new employee comes on. He needs to go to security to get his badge. He needs to go to facilities to get his or her cubicle. You need to work with IT to get your computer. You need to work with finance to get set up in payroll. And so there's a lot of automation in that entire onboarding process that is now being offered on ServiceNow versus the simple, I have an HR request and I'm going to reach out to HR through a desk solution.
So I get that from the potential. What I'm asking about is how much engagement are you actually getting from customers?
Okay, so
Around that.
I've got some numbers that I
Sure,
can talk about.
Okay, I don't know what's in your material.
I don't know where the camera thing is going to go. So a few things to think about, right? So if I look at our customer base right now, I can tell you that we've got something like over 35,000 applications that our customers have built, right? I can look at, I can query across our set of customers and see that fact. We've got something like, I think it's around 1,700 customers now that are actually, they don't just license, ITSM, HR, those types of things directly, but they're actually paying us to use the platform to build custom applications, right? So that's the kind of traction that we're seeing. I think the question maybe was a little bit around sort of go-to-market strategy and how are we doing that now versus in the past? Because in the past we were kind of like, well, if it happens, great, but we weren't really kind of pushing on that, right? And saying explicitly, like, we're a platform, we have this business here, right? Hey, Mr. Customer, would you like to build some applications on our platform? And that's something that we, about 2 years ago, we split up to kind of solve that problem. There was an organizational thing that we did, which is we created different business units within ServiceNow who have their own sort of self-contained development, product, go-to-market, all those things to be able to say, okay, and we have a platform business unit, which is what I'm here representing, that focuses on, how do we go to market with the platform and sell that to customers? And then you've started to see our messaging change a little bit, right? It's less about ITSM and less about purely focused on modernizing IT and those types of things and moving into a platform as a service type of messaging. And we'll kind of get there in our next iteration more and more and more to have more of a strategic conversation with customers around things like digital transformation and that type of stuff.
Because the difficulty you have is that other platforms, Salesforce, for example, did CRM and then their platform was very much off to the side. Sales and marketing people used the platform to build stuff and then they told that story. Your platform story is kind of orthogonal to the core business.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, there's a lot of similarities there, right? When you look at sort of the what transpired at Salesforce and like, hey, we've got this platform underneath. Let's start sort of going to market with that, right? And there are a lot of similarities between them and between us. I would say that where we play, and we definitely do find ourselves in situations where we're competing directly against them, a lot of what they focus on is like we're the customer success platform, and we're very much like this is customer focused stuff. And so when we've traditionally kind of competed against them. We focused more on, well, that's great, except for, there's a disconnect between what happens when the customer engagement ends, and now your business actually has to go and fulfill that thing for that customer. And that's where the big disconnect is, because we sort of take over in the business and the operations side of it, which is how does your company work to service that customer, and how does that workflow flow through the different departments? Because ultimately, a customer doesn't really care how you're set up as a company. They just want their product, they want it fast, they want it fixed when there's a problem, and those types of things.
I think one of the other kind of key differences is that our go-to-market strategy has always been to lead with the application. So rarely are we going into a customer and selling a platform. As I said, Fred Luddy tried to do that when he first started the company, and it's very challenging to sell a platform that can do a bunch of different things. We found it to be a much better go-to-market strategy to go in and lead with the IT applications or the HR or security applications, let the customer get up and running on the platform, and then quickly realize the benefit of extending those capabilities into other use cases. And as Jonathan said, we've seen a number of our customers do that.
Yeah. That's a hard way to go, though, because that then drives you into, let's compare feature functionality of you plus the next ITSM solution or service desk solution to the next one, as opposed to selling based on an experience of how you're helping a business really transform the way that they function, the way they operate.
Bingo.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, those are two very different models. And if you're saying we're going to do the land and expand model, I think that's a much harder way for you to go than trying to think about how do you help the customer in their maturing of how they think about it.
And land and expand in several different areas as well. It's not Salesforce landed and expanded in sales and marketing.
Yeah, it's,
right.
So what?
That's right. That's a good point, because if you hit into HR is not going to talk to marketing or talk to IT, and that's not going to give you leverage.
So what we're doing now, I'm sorry, I'm going to contradict you just a tiny bit here.
Let's just derail the presentation.
These are good questions for later, but so that is what we're trying to do, right? So now we're talking more like, if I talk to a customer, I talk more about, what does your digital transformation look like for you, right? Do you have a chief digital officer? It's a more strategic conversation than, hey, let's help you with IT, and then, let's see if your IT group can help you automate some processes elsewhere. That's not that's not a strategic conversation. The strategic conversation is, we know that every customer, I think IDC said, right, $1.2 trillion is going to be spent on digital transformation in 2017. Every company is speaking in those terms, and so, that's what we do, right? If we're talking to IT is able to enable the business to go through that digital transformation. If we talk to the business, which we are doing now, we've traditionally sold to IT, but a lot of conversations I have with customers is, how do you make money? Tell me how you make money, and what are the processes that are involved in making money, so we can have a conversation about how we help you with that. Because that's a more strategic conversation than sort of, how do we help you?
You're having that conversation with folks in IT?
No.
Okay.
We're going in.
I was going to say, wait a second.
We're up-leveling the conversation.
Those two don't go together.
That's more a CIO, chief digital officer at the executive level through IT. If it's going to be through IT. Otherwise, it's going to be talking to somebody who runs a line of business, or some kind of like a VP of operations or something like that.
So do you see yourselves as partly as a business, an advisor to the business, and how all the rubbish legacy stuff that businesses often have, you can tie it together with your platform to make their life easier, so in effect they can make money in a more simpler or more efficient way? Because we're at Cloudfield Day, and I also was interested to think of ServiceNow, to say you've done cloud just because your product happens to be accessed over the cloud isn't a cloud kind of thing. But it's interesting to hear you say that you're not just talking of sort of revitalizing the IT function to help IT do cloud, but talking to the business and
100%.
Helping with that.
Absolutely, yeah.
What type of applications are you finding that the business needs? Like, what does HR need customized just for them out of your tool?
So a lot of what HR is looking for is around, our customers did it first before we got there, but we realize is they have sort of like systems today that they use, that they kind of store a lot of employee data as a system of record. But the experience of consuming that application from an employee perspective isn't that great. And so where we're playing right now in the HR space is more around the user experience and the engagement of the employee with that internal HR function. So they come through our portal and request services and get updates and those types of things and have a good experience around that. And there might be another system that's the HR system of record on the back end where some of that sort of things are getting updated and changing. But we kind of own the workflow and the user experience side of that from an HR perspective, which is what your question was. I don't know if that answered your question or not. But, if we look across an enterprise, right, we have this promise of the cloud and all these different things with, hey, you can use software to provide applications that these different groups need to run their business. But what we find is when we talk to customers, what this really looks like is they think mainly about their processes as this is my HR process, and this is my legal process, and this is my finance process, and I have my system that does that stuff. And then what that creates is data silos across an enterprise, right? I think of point solutions as data silos, essentially. And then IT is sort of left trying to integrate those. And then we talked about this, or Dominic talked about this a second ago, but there's the poor man's integration between these systems, which is humans, right? We try to hook that stuff up. So, so from a platform perspective, right? And this is kind of where my background as an engineer comes in. Is I always found, especially when I got to ServiceNow, I looked at this and I went, okay, every time I'm trying to build some application for business, I always start out with what is the problem I'm trying to solve. But inevitably, I go through the same steps over and over and over again, which is I figure out, okay, what hardware is this stuff going to run on? What's the operating system that's going to be there? What's the middleware, right? And then finally, I get up to what is the application layer? And ultimately, and I'm really oversimplifying here, right? Because you have to worry about authentication and security and scale and all this kind of stuff, right? But this, if I really look at it, break it down, this is really just complexity, right? The value is all there. And so when we talk about what do we provide, from a platform perspective, we're pushing the development to the top of the stack here so that you can not focus on the complex part, the part that you have to manage long term, and just focus on where the value is. In terms of what are the differentiators and kind of the things that people do with the platform, and you'll see some of this when we start getting into the actual product demo, but first and foremost is a lot of companies are trying to modernize their user experiences. I have legacy applications, or maybe it's not even available at all, maybe it's just a spreadsheet. What ServiceNow is, when you're developing, we provide boilerplate user experiences for your application that are no additional mobile development needed. It just works on a phone or it works on a desktop. And then you can go sort of as pixel perfect as you want, depending on your technical level and capabilities. The other thing where we're differentiated is I can have people who don't know how to code at all and professional developers working on the same exact application. Our marketing team at ServiceNow is a good example of this. So we have people who don't know how to code who started building an application for requesting creative services, like I have a deck that needs to look better, those types of things, and I need somebody to, can you refresh that? Yep. I need somebody to go and do that, right? So they were able to get just far enough with being able to automate, that process and then hand it over to a professional developer, as an example. This is something that our competitors can't say, because if you look at sort of the kind of things you would do as a professional developer versus somebody who doesn't know how to code, it's actually multiple platforms, and you have to integrate them together for them to work. Next is around connecting your enterprise. So there's kind of two things in here. One is, as you build application after application, everything that you build is reusable from a data perspective, from a process perspective, from an integration perspective. So that's all stuff that helps you kind of connect things together so you can think about enterprise services instead of business processes. The other thing this is here is, like, for example, every time you create a table in ServiceNow, we dynamically generate APIs for you. So everything that you build from an application perspective, you can have APIs that we try to get you as far as we can dynamically. Otherwise,
you are talking about connecting all these different business processes together. How much of ServiceNow is getting rid of the bad business processes rather than just creating an abstraction layer to hide the complexity?
That's a great question. A lot of that is up to the business itself, right? In going through kind of like an organizational change and being willing to go through and just throw out a bunch of bad stuff. There's a lot of companies out there that will just take a bad process and then just put that straight into the cloud. And that's not necessarily the best way to do it. But it's a lot of that isn't it's not a technology challenge. That's more of the business has to kind of go through that transformation on their own.
Do some of your applications then help with that because people can see the applications, because onboarding an HR person, onboarding a person into a company via HR is pretty universal across all companies. Some companies will have bad processes. Do the apps based on the platform allow customers to then see, we can do it this way, why don't we get rid of all the other kind of things?
I think how to answer this question. So I guess the way that, if you look at how people adopt ServiceNow internally from an organic perspective, it's usually the case that there's groups start being very successful in providing a better user experience and automating things on the back end. Different groups say, how did you do that? Can you show me how you did that? And they sort of look at what this other group's done, and then it sort of starts proliferating out into the company because they see like, wait a minute, I would like to provide that type of experience for when people interact with me in my part of the business. Did that answer answer the question?
Yeah, that's an interesting take.
How much of your sales goes directly to ServiceNow or goes through like partners, ISVs?
So can I answer? I'm going to talk through the ISV model in just a little bit. There's a couple. I don't know that we really publish those numbers, but is the question more around like how much business do we have a partner who's attached to that sale?
What kind
or is it like actually vendors who are selling their applications and how much comes from that business?
It's more about like kind of your PSO model. Like, do you do consulting for how to implement ServiceNow, or do you kind of sell it and you have other consultants that are doing the implementation for you?
Right. Okay. So we do have a services group that will help a customer go and implement ServiceNow, but we're not trying to be a services company. I mean, I think our goal is that we wouldn't actually need a services group at all in order to be able to implement. Right. That's sort of the gold standard of what we try to attain. But our services team will help. We keep it pretty tight, right? So we don't want them representing any more than I think something like 12% of revenue. So we push as much as possible to a partner to go and implement. And then a lot of what our professional services does is more of like an overlay into what a partner might do, because it's in our best interest to make sure, to make sure that implementation is successful. And so we'll have somebody who runs the engagement from ServiceNow, but it's augmented with, services from a partner. If that makes sense.
I have a follow-on question about how you engage with some of the systems integrators and so on, but it sounds like you're going to cover some of that in a minute.
I'm not going to talk about GSIs necessarily, okay. So maybe ask that question.
Yeah, so I'm just wondering, the target audience you're looking at, Global 2000, they like to deal with the global SIs.
Yep.
How do you deal with, because what we're talking about for a lot of this is changing business process, eliminating particular processes, and as Tim mentioned, this has strategic implications. A lot of companies like to outsource strategic decision making to consultants.
Correct.
For some reason. So I'm wondering how you deal with those customers who want to have you deal with one of these global SIs and how that works.
We end up just working with the GSI. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So we have a whole partner team that is just a big channel team that helps in that process, and we just partner with GSIs. Like if the customer says, I want to work with Cognizant, or I want to work with Infosys, or you name it, we've already got people who manage the relationship with those partners, and we work directly with them, with the customer on however they want to work. And they tend to have big ServiceNow practices internally with people who know how to work on ServiceNow. Like all those big guys have big ServiceNow practices that they would then use for bench for doing the implementation.
How is that different to what you do with the ISVs though? Because it sounds pretty similar.
That question I will get to.
Okay.
So I talked about this before, right? Every application that you build is connected, but the way that we talk about this with customers is ultimately it's network effects, right? what is the value if one person on Earth has a telephone? Just zero, right? But as people start to build more and more and more, right, the value we see go up exponentially. An example of this is like if let's say you build an integration to your assets database. You build that once, your assets are now available within ServiceNow for the next application, the next application, the next application. And the same thing with things like applying machine learning, right? The more data that you have in ServiceNow because you're building applications, the more valuable that type of thing gets. And then now let's answer the question around ISVs. So Dominic showed this family portrait, and this is kind of his view. Here's my view of this as the person who owns the platform is I have sort of three sets of customers that I care about. One is, our ServiceNow applications, businesses build their apps on ServiceNow, but I also have a vendor ecosystem. Those are people who build applications on ServiceNow and go to market with those applications. These are full product companies with sales teams, developers, all of it, customer support lines that are building their SaaS business on ServiceNow and going to market. I'm going to go in more depth just a second. Okay. And then finally, right, so customers wanting to build applications. Here's just this is an example. I have a couple customer examples. I like this one because I like craft beer. And does anybody not know who Stone Brewing is? Okay. That's more hands than I expected to go up, but I'll work with it. This is a San Diego craft beer company, and they run brewery operations on ServiceNow. So they've built, automated those processes that runs their brewery. And they're a small craft brew company, right? So $250,000 to them is a lot of money, but really it's around risk, right? So safety issues, being able to audit after the fact, right? Were we actually compliant in how we were running things? Here's an example of a more sort of big scale rollout. So everybody here knows who CERN is, I'm guessing.
Yep.
CERN runs an entire city. In that city, where they have their hydrogen where they have their colliders, something like 15,000 scientists come in and out of that city every single year to do research. They book time, they do research. The entire city runs on ServiceNow. When you show up and you get a badge and you request that badge, that's being requested and fulfilled through ServiceNow. Getting a room, booking a car, the garbage pickup, all of that is run on ServiceNow. So it's just an example of somebody who's gone full-blown and sort of started to go all in on ServiceNow. Plus, it's CERN, right? I mean, yeah.
Can you go back to Stone Brewing for a minute? So talk about where that started, because to me, I think that's a great example of maybe understanding a little more of how that conversation started with Stone. I mean, granted, they're in your backyard, ServiceNow being a San Diego company, right?
They judge our home brewing contests, yeah.
But my point is, where did that conversation start to run their business on ServiceNow beyond, again, I'm trying to get beyond the service desk components, right? Yep. So where did that conversation start?
That one was actually started in IT, right? Okay. And the IT group was very successful. People started to see that and they said, wait a minute, I can do a lot more stuff here, right? So what does that look like? And then they started automating other business processes around it. I mean, it's a smaller company, so it's easier to kind of branch out and do that kind of.
But IT drove the conversation of brewery operations and understanding supply chain and how that fits into the different components?
Yeah.
Distribution and
the
rest?
The difficulty is that you can do because they're small and there's a relationship, but doing that same thing like business process across the whole organization into a G2000 is that much harder because they are siloed and their buying motion is siloed.
But that's kind of where I'm going with this, right? Is to understand how you went through this as a way to model that when you go into a G1000 or G2000 company, right?
Yeah. So let's take. I mean, there's a large company that I really can't say their name. But they're a big company out of Southern California, And we actually went and directly talked to their business that runs amusement parks, right? And this is just talking directly to that business, right? Not talking to IT, not talking to any of those folks, and started having a conversation around they're trying to go through a digital transformation and say, we've got, they had something like 300 applications that were everything from like, Java to just like, I'm trying to remember, Delphi, just a bunch of like old stuff. And what they wanted to do was just move that onto, when I talked to their VP of application development, what he said was, I've got 260 platforms. That's what he felt like. I've got 260 platforms that I have to manage. I want to just move on to one platform. And so that's kind of a different conversation.
But the difficulty there is, is that there you're talking to IT about some IT systems that IT has to run, which is different from going and talking to the C-suite around some processes that are in across the whole organization.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, I think this goes back to the question I asked too before, was like the detail around, okay, if I'm HR, what am I looking at to help automate? I mean, I think that's kind of what we're all asking here. We're trying to figure out what that business conversation is.
If you're HR, you're looking to do things like my onboarding process spans more than just my HR system, right? So if I have to onboard somebody, I have to get them a desk, I have to get them a laptop, I have to provision an AD accounts for them, I have to get them an email, all those types of things. That's something that spans all these different systems. And so if I'm an employee, what's my experience of, my interactions with HR? They're asking me questions like, do you want a Mac or a PC, right? I choose which one, what fulfillment happens on the back end of that. That's an HR process as far as the employee is concerned, but the HR team, their system, right, doesn't actually touch all of the systems that are required in order to automate that process. So that's around the employee experience within the company and interacting with the HR group.
I see the land and expand kind of thing actually working with ServiceNow, because we do some work with ServiceNow, and a lot of it comes down to IT processes first. So it'll be deploying automated workflows for server provisioning or whatever. Once that's in place, they're going to use it for ticketing, and they're not going to have the HR person anymore send a ticket to open an AD account. They're just not going to do that anymore. So when they provide a portal to automatically add AD accounts, that's when the HR person sees it and goes, well, what else can we do with that? And it kind of expands from there.
The real interesting thing here is this is an existential question. Can IT actually be an enabler of digital transformation? Yeah. Or does digital transformation come from the CMO? And if IT practitioners can actually say, hey, organization, here's a bunch of ways that we can actually ensure our survival by transforming, and here are the tools to do it, and the organisation listens to IT as a strategic enabler rather than just thinking them of as the Department of No, then this works. If it doesn't, and the CMO is where IT budget will end up in the future, then you have a problem.
But I mean, if you look at how we structure, so we have sales plays that we run right with our sales force. One of the sales plays is, hey, you talk to IT, and how do you talk to them about being an enabler of digital transformation? But the other one isn't. The other one is, here's the people that you should go talk to in the business, and here's how you talk to them about automating their processes and going through a digital transformation. That's a different sale. That's different people, and that's where that's where you show up and you say, how do you make money? You don't say, how does your help desk run?
Yeah, because that's the differentiator I can see where you're trying to go to, which is harder because we're talking a lot about the internal company processes, but onboarding someone via HR is not going to make any company any more money. It's just going to maybe get them working, but that's such, you can't correlate that. Well, you're talking directly to the business, which is I can see that's a tough sell, but that's where the money's going to be in the future.
Yeah, I think that the challenge here, and kind of going back to Ben's comment, is that most of the digital transformation work that's being done today is not driven from IT. Yeah. It's driven from outside of IT, and IT becomes a downstream component of that. The challenge there, and I think this is one of the challenges that ServiceNow is going to have, is in order for what you said, Ben, to actually play out where IT becomes the driver for that, there's one key step that's missing that hasn't been discussed here. They have to understand what their business is. And this is why I wanted to go back to the Stone Brewing example. They have to understand what their business does. They have to understand how their business makes money, how their business spends money.
Absolutely.
And the vast majority of IT folks that you come across and work with, they don't have a clue about that. And they haven't had to in the past. So that's not a bash of IT folks. I mean, shoot, I was an IT person for decades, which is really sad. But that's a different conversation.
I don't know. I would go that far. I'd say the IT departments struggle to understand the business of IT.
The IT
that too.
But business, and the business has to trust IT, and there's a two-step process there, and neither of them are.
I mean, I know that you and I have had conversations about this, right? This is the three-legged race that I talk a lot about. The business needs to change the way they think about IT. The CIO needs to change how they think about business transformation, and the IT organization. All three have to work together in concert, right? If they don't, you fail. It's just like a three-legged race at a picnic. So I think one of the challenges would be, how does ServiceNow kind of insert yourself, and this is kind of where I was trying to get in my earlier conversations, and I'll back off a bit because I really want you to get through the presentation and hear a little more about how you get into this. But what I'm looking for is, how do you get in and take a leadership role to help drive some of that conversation? Because I really believe ServiceNow is in a unique position to potentially drive that conversation. The question is, number one, do you understand how to do it? And number two, are you able to do it? And number three, that's only going to show up in the results of who you're working with and how you're working with them.
Yeah. There's a lot I want to say, but like you said, keep going. I could really talk about this particular topic all day long. So, look, a platform, back to the presentation, a platform's not a platform unless you have an ecosystem, right? So you need to have a thriving developer ecosystem. You need to have a place for them to work together, to share content, and then we have a store, right? And so we launched our store back at our Knowledge Conference in 2015. Since then, right, you can see the numbers here, right? So we've had, something like 2,692 app installs, and we've got 1,565 of our customers who have gone and purchased an application on the store. And this is a big deal for us because these are people who are betting the farm on ServiceNow. They're going and only selling their products in some cases, some of them no, but their products in the ServiceNow store. And they're doing it because they can get to market quickly. And from a security, a compliance, a FedRAMP, you can be a 5-man shop, build an application, build a SaaS business, and walk into Johnson & Johnson and sell it. Right? This is not $2 iPhone applications. This is people who are selling applications for millions of dollars, enterprise SaaS vendors that are building their businesses here. And they're doing things that are outside of what ServiceNow does, right? So take somebody like Connective over here. Connective they sell to life sciences and hospitals. So they do things like clinical laboratory asset management, right? They have booths at HIMSS, right? Places where we would never go. And then people like MobiCord, who does mobility management for enterprises. I think the lowest they've saved the company is something like 50% on their TOCO bill, because they go in and they aggregate across all of our different providers and provide how much you're spending, are people using it. So these are just some examples of what people are building. And this knowledge we did sort of like a Shark Tank thing we did at CreatorCon. CreatorCon is our developer conference that runs in parallel with our Knowledge Conference. And this is just an interesting story. So this guy right here, his name's TJ. TJ in 2011 was a support call center person working the night shift. And he knew how to code. He was asked to fix a problem on ServiceNow. He fixed the problem because he knew JavaScript. And fast forward to today, him and a 3-man shop won the second place in this CreatorCon challenge. What they do is identity lifecycle management. So you can, as a ServiceNow customer, you can download their application into your instance and start doing identity lifecycle management with their app. So they started selling that in May, and they already have their first customer live and in production. So they already made a sale, and they told me they've got 5 more customers in the pipe right now that they're going to book. So this is 3 people who now have become an enterprise SaaS vendor, which I love that story. I really do, because I have a special place in my heart for, like, you know, the little team of people that wants to go to market with this big application.
Is there a way that people could write apps and open source them or provide them? Not everyone necessarily wants to make money from them.
Yeah, I mean, you know, yes. So we have a site called Share. It's share.servicenow.com, where, like, if our customers like to do this, they like to build stuff and then just kind of put it there, and people can share all of the content and work on it together and that type of thing.
So can one customer write an application that does something, someone else can see that and think, oh, that's great, I'll take 80% of it and add a bit more, and eventually it gets built up?
They can get their hand on the application metadata. They can make the changes that they want and own it within their environment. Yeah.
But share that back so other customers can also
leverage. Yeah, if they want to, then they can put it back on Share. So yeah, we're way behind, but I'm trying to get this going. So this is kind of where we see the market going. When we talk to customers, platform consolidation is a big thing that they want to talk about. They have too many different types of platforms that they end up having to hook up together. And so what we're starting to see now is there's sort of two types of vendors from a platform as a service that are kind of emerging in our customer base. And that is infrastructure as a service, and then this whole application platform as a service. So the application platforms as a service are starting to do more of what the mobile backend does, and the BPM and the integration platforms as a service. And customers are wanting to say, well, I'd rather deal with less vendors. I'd rather build more in one spot, not have to hook this stuff up together. And then in the case where I want to write something that I need to have high control over, I'm going to go more towards, you know, Amazon or Azure or something like that, because I need to get more and more custom. And so really what we see is this emergence of a concept of an integrated platform as a service, which is I have my application development platform in this, and it's the same platform as integration platform as a service. It's the same platform as, you know, in machine learning, conversational interfaces, those types of things. But that's really where we see ourselves being positioned and differentiated, is we play in the integrated platform as a service space. So here's a different lens on it as well. And this is kind of along the lines of what we believe that we do as a company, which is we're all about taking the next wave of technology and lowering the bar so that people who would have to be data scientists or professional developers or PhDs in order to take advantage of that technology can incorporate it into the problems that they're trying to solve. And so what do we see going on here is, first and foremost, there's more and more systems that people have to integrate with. And so we're adding new products and technology that are coming in the very near future that we would love to talk to you about, but can't talk to you about right at this moment, that's going to make that very, very possible. So this is just a map of what it looks like today, right? You've got your omni-channel user experiences, you got some data and some business process, right? People interact with that stuff. So more and more systems, and then we have something that is that's called metric base. That's this yellow thing that popped up, which is now we have a way to take in large volumes of IoT data, right? So I can actually track, you know, wind turbine information over time. I can store large amounts of data, incorporate that IoT data into the business problems that I'm trying to solve. And then, okay, we have all this data, right? And so how do you enable somebody who doesn't have a PhD to incorporate machine learning and take advantage of the data that they now have in ServiceNow? That's something that's also coming in the very near future. And we've already got customers who've got their hands on early versions of that as well. And then finally, look, we're all trying to turn computers and interact with them the way that we interact with people. And so we also have conversational interfaces that you'll be able to provide, excuse me, to applications that you build, right? And again, these are all things that we're building in such a way that somebody who doesn't have the deep sort of technical background can incorporate into what their they're trying to do and the problems that they're trying to solve. So with that, if folks don't have any other questions, I'm going to hand it over to Josh, who's going to have to figure out how to give a 1-hour demo in
So just
not that much time.
One quick question. ServiceNow used to have this goes back several years now. ServiceNow used to have a floor in terms of buying, like a minimum amount and I think it was something like $25K a month, something like that.
Yep, okay.
Does that still exist? And if so, where is that floor today?
Yeah, it still exists, and it's 42.
42K?
Yeah.
Okay, so 42K a month. Okay, so it's gone up. How do you handle?
No, not 42K. That's ACV would be 42K. And so yearly.
Oh, 42K a year. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like 80%, maybe more like 75% sure of what I just said.
Okay.
So.
So what happens if you fall below that threshold? Like I'm thinking about developers and others beyond just the classic,
Oh, there's
Fortune
no
500
money to be a
customer.
developer. You can go to the developer site today. You can get a development environment and start building with no charge.
That's new.
That is new. Yes, that's something that we did before Knowledge 15 actually, so that we could build an ecosystem of developers. So you can do that today. And if you want to get more of like a production setup, you can become a technology partner with ServiceNow. And I think it's, gosh, I'm trying to remember, maybe it's $5,000 or something like that. Gets you like more of your traditional like dev, test, prod environment type of setup so that you can be a little bit more serious and start listing on the store.